Fragments of silicon, now more shatter resistant than ever.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Programming note: we just got word of about an hour ago. It was just handed down from Mac that not only is he not here on Fragments, but there's no last news desk because he has some day job stuff to do this week, let's say. So, with that in mind, I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is the regular crew. Let's get to the news. Petty, why don't you start us off this week? Because, well, you've got some stuff that may be affecting things on Fridays.
All right. Well, actually, that might be happening on Thursdays now, so won't be affecting the show. But I will keep you guys posted because apparently my dad started a new job and he's getting a new schedule. So it's going to affect the day we usually have breakfast as a family, which used to be on Saturdays. So we're either going to see about doing it on Thursday mornings or Friday mornings. It really depends what days are easier.
Okay.
So that's one of those we're going to have to wait and see type deals.
All right. I mean, if it's on Thursdays, then, good for you.
Yeah.
It's
Um, as far as other personal news, my mom had her surgery on her arm on Monday. So hooray! Hopefully that heals up.
Yep.
And yeah. Other than that, not a whole lot big that I can think of going on.
All right, then. Galix?
Learning some new stuff at work still. It's been interesting, but that it's a little bit more mentally taxing than some of the other stuff I do, so that's how it goes. Other than that, it's certainly, well, the weather's been weird here. It's been getting warm, but then sometimes it'll rain and then be much cooler, and I don't know. It's been back and forth, but that's not super unusual for New England in spring. But I'm thinking about when I need to put in my air conditioner. Um, as of today, I'm fully vaccinated for coronavirus, so that's good. Um, and I'm getting a haircut tomorrow, which I desperately need.
Man.
Other than that, gaming wise, have been continuing the Sunday MS Saga stream with Mac. My Pathfinder group on Sundays is starting up again in uh 2 weeks, I guess, the 6th. But that shouldn't. I'll be like leaving that a little early probably, and might just be a little late for MS Saga. That won't be a problem. Um, at least hopefully. And hopefully we'll be able to figure something out by the time daylight savings happens, because that will make it be significantly earlier. Um, that's about all I got, I think.
All right. Twilight?
I guess most notably, in terms of things that have happened, the buckle for my driver's side seatbelt broke on me a few days ago, and I'm going to get that taken to the dealership and fixed. Yeah,
That doesn't
I
seem
have.
safe.
Yeah, luckily, the strap can reach far enough to get to the passenger side buckle, but yeah, still need to get that taken care of for anybody who wants to ride with me in the future. Yeah, like my mother, for example. Um, yeah, they'll be taking supposed to be getting taken care of this Friday, but have to wait and see. how that plays out. You never know anymore. Um, Besides that, yeah, they at work they are allowing both customers and the workers, my coworkers, to no longer have to wear masks. Well, at least for us, as long as we bring in the proof of that of our vaccination cards. I'm holding off to wait and see what happens myself, but most people have, yeah, stopped wearing masks, and there's a 2 week waiting period. So yeah, that's what I'm waiting on to see. So it's been kind of weird to see people not wearing masks now. But yeah, then besides that, been continuing the Monday sessions with Mac and Kira with Overwatch, and trying out some other characters now. Com- Going to try to completely abstain from Reinhardt. So I just, yeah, not enjoying playing as him, honestly. Eh, Nato's been working out so far. But yeah, uh, overall, the last session was went pretty well. So yeah, I've been playing my game for this Sunday, and that's about it.
All right, it's my go.
Yep.
Let's see. I suppose the biggest news my way this week is just some family drama boiling up. Now, don't really want to talk about it on air, but that's a thing that, uh, let's say, stumbled onto the doorstep a couple of days ago because a family member needed some breathing space, and because let's just say they are going through some troubles. And hopefully things will get, well, I won't say smoothed out, but eased up, maybe.
Less
Like,
bad.
yeah, something like that. I mean, it's one of those situations where it doesn't get good, but can certainly be less painful, but maybe not. Anyway, that's about it for me this week. Uh, So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week are James Spanos and Victor Pflug. Is that how it's pronounced?
Pflug, how's it going? Great to
Hello.
be here.
Hello, guys. Thank you for having us.
No problem. No problem. They are both of Wormwood Studios. Right. So, how we like to get started here is we like to get to know the people behind the game, the studio, and all that such. And we start by asking this question: what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and professional level?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I might field that first if that's okay, James.
Yeah, all good. Go ahead.
Well, basically, I got into like concept art for video games like well over like I guess almost 2 decades ago now, like ages ago. But I was part of a whole lot of failed teams basically where there was a lot of big ideas but not a lot of follow through, and yeah, basically just on 3 or 4 failed projects, and I was like, I think I could do better to actually bring a game to release than a lot of these people I'm working with. So kind of got in touch with James and Mark, and then soon after that, Wormwood Studios came about pretty much. Yeah.
Well, for me, it was I always wanted to be featured in this magazine in Greece because that's where I'm from. That I would buy every week, and I would be like, it would be awesome if I could ever get featured into it. And at some point, I started playing adventure games, and I fell in love with Monkey Island 2, The Jack's Revenge. And then I downloaded the only engine at the time that was doing specifically adventure games, thinking I'm making the next Monkey Island 2. And after I think like 7 very failed, hopefully gone and forgotten freeware projects, I met Victor and Mark. Mark is our writer, and they said, "Hey, we might need a programmer, but we're not sure. So we might need you for like the difficult things." And then I ended up being a fully fledged programmer for Primordia, and the rest is kind of history about that.
Yeah, it turns out he's a way better programmer than me. So
Now, are all of you founding members of Wormwood, or like, is it one, two? Like, how
I'm-
long have you been both at Wormwood, basically?
well, it's pretty much all three of us. The three musketeers, I guess, is how we see ourselves. Like, I mean, I kind of had the first initial spark of an idea for our first game, Primordia. But like I said, pretty much a couple of months into me starting to develop that, I hooked up with James and Mark, and then pretty much three-way co-founding the studio from there, and never looked back. Yeah.
Yep, pretty much what he said.
Now, when Wormwood was founded, was it always aimed towards, let's say, commercial releases, or was it more, or is it still more like freeware releases? Because I know that's a popular thing on the AGS circuit.
Well, and no, it's always very much commercial games in mind. I mean, I'd already released or kind of worked on and released a few games on AGS Adventure Game Studio before Primordia and before hooking up with James and Mark. So it was pretty much me deciding this is how I wanted to kind of earn money for a while and thinking, yeah, release a game commercially. I mean, Strangeland was almost sort of a freeware short game idea, but Primordia was pretty much that when it began as well. So yeah, you could say we're definitely a commercial studio.
Okay. And well, you've mentioned a couple times, but indeed your first game was Primordia.
Mhm.
That brings back some memories because we featured that, I think, about 9 years ago.
Oh
Like,
Yeah,
wow,
it's
yeah,
been
like,
out that long. Yeah.
it's actually starting to get nostalgic thinking about it. That's crazy.
like I remember we had Dave Gilbert of Wajitai on the program to talk about Primordia.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, yeah, that's a lifetime ago there. Like, but anyway, getting into Primordia from your vantage point, what made you want to create a adventure game of, let's say, that nature? Because Primordia is a pretty special game.
Yeah,
Well,
go ahead, Vic. This is your alley.
well, I think I speak for James and all three of us when I say that we all really wanted to. We love adventure games, and we wanted to release like not an epic adventure game because that's how I saw studios fail early on in my career, but we wanted to release. I guess you could call it a masterpiece in the old sense of the word, like a game that would kind of put us on the map and be a stepping stone to further projects. And I don't know, it definitely grew sort of into an epic project with feature creep during its development and stuff. So
Like, I guess from a certain point of view, I remember Primordia not being that long, or not necessarily ambitious, but it was very much in line with what Watch It I was releasing at the time. But I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of one of the invisible pitfalls of video game development. Things always, believe me, we've had enough developers on the program to tell us in various fashions that a project that they thought was going to be much smaller ended up being much larger.
yeah. I think almost any game can suffer from that, or is it at
Oh, this
risk of
happens to
suffering from
other
that.
people too? I didn't know that.
uh, but
But
um,
I'm the worst with that though. Like I'll constantly want to add extra rooms and characters and ideas because I can spit out like art graphic assets pretty quickly. And a lot of it has to be put in the virtual trash bin, I guess, because yeah, we don't want 1,000 red herrings in the game and whatnot. And yeah,
right.
Mark keeps me in line. These guys keep me in line pretty much.
I mean, it was really funny because when we were making Primordia, Victor, this is June of 2008, I think. He tells me will be done by August. And Mark sends me a design document of 92 pages. And I'm like, I think it's going to take more than that. Mark, at the time, a writer, was freshly married. When we finished Primordia, he had 2 kids. So that took a while. Yeah.
Right. And uh, I mean, I don't really want to dwell too much on Primordia since that's a previous game from quite a long time ago. But one thing I do want to ask is, how did you get hooked up with David and Watchdie?
Oh, like I think we're happy to talk about Primordia as much as you like, but hooking up with Dave, I think that's something that happened pretty naturally through the AGS forums and the Adventure Game Studio community. Basically, like he was publishing, I think, not Techno Babylon, but Gemini Rue was on the cards at the time for him, formerly known as Borayukadan Rue, and a couple of other games. I forget the one. What was that other one with the time link dimension thing, James? Oh, anyway, basically, he just saw us developing Primordia, and I think sent out a feeler to me or Mark, and it was kind of a match made in heaven from there on, I think. Although I'm pretty difficult to work with, and definitely didn't make things easy for Dave. Whereas Strangeland has been a much smoother process, I think. There, we brought Strangeland to Dave Gilbert very late in the process, so he really just had to do voice acting and help us tidy up and polish the game, basically. So yeah.
Yeah, I think to that extent, I think, like, at the time we were not very we were very amateurs, like, if we're being honest with
Mm.
anybody. We didn't know how things worked. And we I think we had, like, Mark Lovegrove, who is the publisher of Cat Lady. At the time, he was just writing music for Yachi, that had the Ben Cross show, I think that's how you pronounce his name. The escapist guy, the how do you call those? The one where he talks really fast.
Oh,
Anyway,
Zero Punctuation.
yeah, yes, they were working together. Mark was the only person that knew Yahtzee. That was his nickname, and he was making music for him, and we had him in Primordia, and he made this really nice but very MIDI soundtrack for Primordia. And
Yeah,
Dave,
big shout outs to Mark Lovegrove. He had an
yeah,
amazing MIDI soundtrack for Primordia going.
yeah, but it was
Yeah,
MIDI, so Dave was like pushing to like he was like, I'm not having any of that. Like, we're not gonna have MIDI. We're gonna have like proper soundtrack. And
living in the future of sound.
yeah, and to his defense, like, I mean, Mark had an amazing soundtrack, but it sounded really old, which fitted the game. But at the same time, I feel like Nathaniel Chambers, who made the music, really elevated the game. I really
I
like
think
the
so.
music.
Yeah. As much as I would have loved to have the Lovegrove soundtrack, I think it was the right decision. And Dave has been really great with that, like helping us be the commercial studio that we might not otherwise quite have been. Probably more artistic and maybe less good decision makings with art. Hmm.
Mm. Well, at any rate, did Primordia do well?
Yeah, yeah. Mark, I believe, has a post of the sales, like, I think 2017 or so. I think we at the time we've sold like 200,000, more than 200,000 copies. I think 237 at the time. Yeah, it has really been a sleeper hit, because Primordia was very lucky in its thing that we signed with Dave thinking, we're gonna get into Steam, and it's not like it is now where you just make an account and you're in Steam. Instead, it was like you had to find a publisher that has published on Steam, that it would make the process easier. So we're like, oh, it's gonna be easy peasy. We're gonna get into Steam. Everything is gonna go well. But Steam sends us instead an email. They say you need to go through Greenlight, and I think it took the game a week, 2 weeks maybe, to get out of Greenlight. And every comment on the thing was like bashing on Valve, like, why Greenlight is wrong. It was the second game out of Greenlight, actually. Um, And I think that gave a big momentum to the game's sales in general. Like it, it was like, look, these guys are making this old school LucasArts style point and click, and Valve doesn't want it, and people kind of rallied behind that. And I think that I was like an X factor to the game's success.
Hmm.
Well, I'm
I mean,
hoping
that's
maybe
good to
we're.
hear. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm almost hoping maybe we'll see sort of the same sort of thing. I mean, we've had some very interesting reviews of Strangeland so far. Some that seem to it definitely rubs some people the wrong way. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing so far. I mean, not that I'm like one for controversy or trying to make a controversial, piece of media or anything like that. But I think it's interesting. Maybe it's more of a unique game than Primordia. I guess time will tell, though.
Well, I mean, getting into Strangeland, I can absolutely see why that kind of reaction would be elicited. Not necessarily because of any sort of, say, political themes or what have you, but this game is off-putting. It's got a very grungy and dark art style that is the stuff of nightmares, if I'm being quite frank.
Well, yeah. I mean, I tried to make a game that was, I mean, assets at least that were unsettling. And I think I did a decent job there. But I wasn't trying to be cheap. Like that's why we don't really have jump scares in Strangeland. Like I wanted to do something that felt a bit more like Twin Peaks than I don't know, a Newgrounds Flash game or something, I guess.
Hmm. I'm not sure if I could call this Twin Peaks. This is more. Have either of you ever played Darkseid?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Darkseid it's pretty much the number one artistic influence on Strangeland. I'll say that straight up. I mean, yeah.
I kind of
I'm
suspected that,
familiar
but
with Darkseid.
I'm like, because the artwork is very, let's say, Geiger-esque.
Hmm.
Yeah, he says that in his commentary. Yeah, the
Well, I mean,
exact words, actually. Yeah.
I'm a huge Geiger fan myself. I mean, we're both Swiss. I have a Swiss background too, which I think is cool. But it's
Right.
Darkseid is one of those games that I kind of love to hate, or it's like a guilty kind of pleasure game for me. I'm kind of obsessed with them in a way. I remember seeing one of the boxes for Darkseid 1 on a shelf as a kid with the Geiger artwork with a yellow border, and I kind of initially tried to make a game that looked just like that box art, and then brought in purple as like an accent color, and also to sometimes hint at what's coming at the game or highlight certain things. But that's that's a whole other topic.
No doubt, no doubt. Anyway, I suppose getting deeper into this game, Strangeland. Uh, I suppose for the uninitiated, what is this game about? Granted, I just completed the game today, and I'm not exactly sure what went on there.
Well, I think Strangeland, of course, like to a lot of people, would be like a very different. I mean, it is a very different experience than Primordia. Primordia is, I feel, a more of a purebred adventure game. That
Mhm.
it's like, you get your robots. There's a goal. They fight the bad robot, and essentially, I mean, that's not just it, but that's the basic gist of it. Strangeland is like the typical trope guy finds himself in a dreamy like world, and strange
Amnesiac.
things are happening. No pun intended. Um, but I think what personally the game to me personally is very very humane, and the whole story. I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, in a sense, is like this trip to within instead of a trip, to a direction. You're like going within deeper and deeper into the characters, the stranger's personality rather, and his troubles. And that's a
And the
basic.
world is created around around his mind or inside his mind too.
Yeah, and it's
I think
essentially
that's a
like,
good way to put it.
Yeah, essentially it's like deeper and deeper into his into somebody's mind, where initially you would see the protective layers, rather, the facade of the whole thing, like whatever we think things should signify, but essentially that
Mm.
progressively gets stripped down. That's why it gets more disturbing and more vivid and more barren, and the colors start fading essentially.
But I think also it's essentially it's a meat and bones mechanical adventure game at its core too. So it's not like a just a metaphysical sort of journey where you just where you just work out what's going on. It can also just be played as a straight up adventure game, I think too. Like the movie The Labyrinth. It's like, you know, Sarah goes on a journey and stuff within her mind maybe, but it's also a journey she's literally going on with her feet too. So
Hmm. I suppose that makes sense. And yeah, this is a very, very symbolic adventure drenched in metaphor. Like, um,
Oh.
and
Hmm.
what made you want to do a game like that versus, you know, a more traditional adventure game type thing?
Well, the thing is, for Mark and Victor, specifically, like the thing that sparked the whole project was that Mark's grandparents passed away, so he found himself, looking at their stuff after they're gone, and he felt like this, creative outlet that he would like essentially create a memory palace for somebody. And that is essentially the thing that sparked it all. Um, and while the game does appear very dark and very like, I'm gonna say this, but it's not exactly that, but like inhumane. Um, like all these like dark feelings that the evokes to the person playing it, like depression and self-doubt and all these deep feelings, those are feeling rather real and like attached to the player, because that's how Mark feels. And essentially this is not a game that is like being edgy and pretentious for the sake of being edgy and pretentious, like because that could possibly sell, but it's more of like a way, like a coping mechanism to overcome these feelings. And I sound a bit pretentious saying that, but like um, get through it all. That's how I take the project as. That's how it
and
was intended, rather.
I think that's also if you want to engage the game in that manner as well. Like, yeah, I've seen a lot of people play it but not think too deeply, and I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily.
I mean, that's certainly an interesting way of playing the game. Like, granted, I'm not exactly sure how one would be able to play this game shallowly, given everything that's going on, but perspective and all that. But at any rate, how long in development was Strangeland in for?
Supposedly 2 weeks, but we all know that never works out with Wormwood Studios. So it took 4 years and 9 days to
And
make.
change.
Yeah,
Nine
and some
days.
minutes. Yeah, it took that long, and the reason it took that long, I think, is very humane in its core, because it's where Primordia is more like, let's sit down and fix and progress the game naturally, because it is based on arcs. Like when you keep looking into a more personal project like Strangeland, it's more difficult to get the inspiration and get the output into the player's screen. So it's
Yeah, it
difficult
can be
to
harder
press
to uncover
somebody.
those personal gems. Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to press like somebody to to do this project, be like, we need this asset, when you know where it's coming from.
I
And to that, for example, like to what you said, that like the main antagonist of Strangeland, which is the darker version of yourself, essentially. You know, who berates you, who tells you that you're not much, and you're a failure and all that. Um, that is basically, for example, that's based off on the voice that we hear within ourselves, like that voice that tells you that you're not good at something, that that you basically, and sorry for the words, you fucked it up. And we all hear that voice at some point in our lives, that dark voice. And that's what that signifies, and that's why that feels harsh and real to people.
You are your own worst critic.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely.
You are that. Unfortunately, it is the truth. But but the game also shows the humane side that Mark also himself feels, that since he wrote that things are not always bad, but we choose, we decide that they should be that way, when there's always the light, essentially, at the end of every tunnel.
Yeah, I definitely can see that playing through the game and getting the best ending, let's say. Um,
Well,
anyway,
people have said there's the music is oppressive and like doesn't have any like up moments. I'm like, no, I totally included a couple of up moments there and stuff. Like, it's not supposed to oppress you constantly.
I mean, I mean, I can definitely understand the critiques, though. Like, I mean,
Oh yeah,
it's mostly an oppressive game, obviously intentionally so, but the atmosphere is there. Like, and as noted, it really doesn't get better, like until the end, let's say.
oh, it gets worse towards the end, if anything. Yeah, I mean, the darkest hour is before dawn, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and go ahead, sorry.
yeah, I'm just talking more about the very end of things. Uh,
Mm.
Yeah, and I think
um,
it's a dark idea that you understand that this whole thing is not what you initially found in the game as quirky, and like you're like, ha ha ha, the musketes, and because that's the facade part of the game. You're like, you realize that this whole thing is something very specific, and the nature of that is dark,
And
and the
elusive.
realization of that, I feel like the hard part of the game, like mentally, is that you realize there's not much escapism in that, and you're trying to find, like, the good side, but playing the game, you don't feel that till the very end. And I can see that how that can be off-putting. Of course, I don't think Strangeland is for everybody,
no.
and
I
and
mean,
we see that and we understand that.
certainly, this game is very, is very dark and disturbing. And it's got very, like legitimately mature themes, and that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Um, Not to mention, getting into the themes a bit more. This is about overcoming, let's say, actions that led to mistakes versus, more medical born depression.
Yeah,
And and there's a distinction between those two. You know, and I could see like people who suffer from depression not really clicking with this game either, because you know their depressive feelings come from a different place, let's say.
I
yeah.
just hope no one that feels like they suffer from depression is put off playing this game, maybe because it might make it worse. Like, I mean, I do hope they kind of give the game a chance when they feel they're in the right mood and stuff. I mean, it's I guess yeah, like it's weird because this game has come from a really dark place for me personally and stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that Mark put in the game that hit me on a really personal note, and I had to dig pretty deep for the visuals and the sound, and I guess even making it was difficult personally a lot of the time. But I don't know, there's some things that rub me the wrong way, and I don't know, I wouldn't want anyone that feels emotionally like I do to be put off because they might feel it might depress them or something. Like they, yeah. I know it's hard to describe.
I think to what Vic said, I think I mean the basic parallel I find is like I'm sure you guys have seen or heard of Requiem for a Dream, which is a very
Yeah,
movie.
yeah,
I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it only once fully, and I've seen like the initial part where it's spring. I think that's how they call it. Like I've seen that like 30 times, but then winter comes, and I'm like, oh, I remember where this is going, and it hurts me to see that movie. But I think the basic difference between a movie that's like really hits you, like Requiem for a Dream and Strangeland, is that I feel like Requiem for a Dream, there's no I mean, I don't think there is no good ending in that movie. Like there is no um
Catharsism?
yeah, there is no all of it is pessimistic, and it ends up being
Yeah.
awful for the characters. Well, whilst in Strangeland that doesn't seem to be that is not the case
Well, that's the
entirely.
thing. I feel like Strangeland has a catharsis to it, definitely. I mean, I
A much
I
needed one.
personally cried like reading Mark's script for the ending of the game. I think not to toot our own horn, but I think it has a very strong end game, and I mean, it definitely made me shed a tear of maybe partly joy. I think at the end.
But I think to ignoring what Victor said, but no, but to that I think um, knowing where Mark comes from and knowing where we all come from, of course, because we somehow contributed to that, is that it's a very humane, like a visceral part, of course, of the game exists, and a very disturbing part of the game exists, but we don't want anybody to feel like down in the dumps and actually accept what your antagonist is saying the whole time, that you're not good for anything, and you're the one that always makes the same mistakes. And that's really harsh to hear, because we all can relate. We've all done mistakes, like we're human. um but I think
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
but I think the part that people, I think, sometimes miss playing the game, I feel, is that the part that overcomes all this also comes within us. Like the woman is also a part of the fiction. Like it's also part of the head, and like those words never existed. Essentially, like they exist because there's the need for them to exist, and taking those words to heart, and feeling the mother-like love of the woman, rather. I mean, that sounds a bit Freudian, but but feeling that comfort and that warmth of somebody else that really cares for you. I think we've also felt that as humans. I mean, at some point in our lives, like from our mother, from a partner, from whoever. um and I think that's the difference between something that really is meant to pull you under.
yeah, that makes sense. Like if this game reminds me of anything, I, I'm not sure if either of you've seen the movie When Dreams May Come, or What Dreams
Yes.
May Come.
Yes, a wonderful movie. Yes, yes, I love that movie.
Yeah,
That is a good parallel. That's a very good parallel to Strangeland.
yeah. Uh, Reminded me a lot. Not going into spoiler territory, but yeah, there is definitely a strong parallel there. Anyway, so shifting a bit to like the actual development. You mentioned that this game started out as a, let's say, 2 week micro project. How did it evolve into this 4 year odyssey?
Have you
Ooh.
seen the movie Inception?
Yes.
Remember this part that they go, that he says the idea is like it's like a parasite. So I think what started with Strangeland is that it would have been a very mediocre and a game that nobody would have liked at any capacity, because it was only like Act One, I think, in length, like an hour, and it's really difficult to embrace all these feelings without spacing them out and without, to give them the proper breathing space. And
And the artwork was terrible. I should release the early art
no, the
from
artwork was fine. The coding was horrible. uh, but my personal thing is that I felt the need for this project to keep increasing in size, because I felt the story was also like became personal to me, like a personal investment. Because I really liked the parallel you actually said with that movie is perfect, because I love that movie so much, and it has like this really dark part of it, and it's really bleak, really bleak, really hurtful to anybody, and then it has like this crying of joy moment where they reunite and everything is perfect. And my personal goal was like to space out the things and kind of give that same emotion, like this roller coaster of emotion of like um in a sense. So I wasn't gonna let it go for 2 weeks personally, and I made sure. But at the same time, I also think that both Mark and Vic felt the same way.
Right.
definitely.
And like, at what point did you reach and say that's enough? That's the scope of this project.
Well, for me, for me, it was when I'd thrown more and more art assets and character sprites at writer Mark, and he said, "Okay, that's enough. We have no place for a Jack in the Box that jumps around the map and like has dialogue that I'm not going to write for it." I mean, I think a
suppose
lot
that,
of the creep came from that too. Yeah,
I mean, I suppose that's a pretty clear line. Like,
Yeah, no, definitely. I think for Mark, since he's not here, unfortunately, like I think for him, it wasn't the lack of inspiration to make more. It was more like he had a specific thing that he wanted to achieve with the game. A good example is like the third act of the game didn't exist at the time. Um, so he found whenever he found a reason for us to expand the game both in like assets and in story, we did. But when we reached the point where we had like the game as it technically is right now, except like it wasn't, the final dialogues were not written. um but that's when he realized, like, he's like, I just need to write this down and make it exist, but I don't think we need anything more. And from that point, and whenever that would happen during the project, me and Vic would really work on like the the facade, I guess, of the game, like making it more stylish and giving it
bit more
like
spit polish.
yeah, that's how the game came to be. Like, in my opinion, this like very distilled 4 hours of like so
And
much
I always
detail.
very much wanted it to be a singular experience you could enjoy in one night or two, like a horror thing you could do on a Saturday night, basically. And I do think if we pushed it out anymore, it I think people would be complaining that it has extraneous areas and plods on a bit and stuff. Like I'm quite happy with the length.
yeah, I think it's as long as it needs to be, because this is this is a game that could very much overstay its welcome if it were too long. Just given the
Definitely.
once again, it's got a brutal atmosphere. One
Yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
one that I don't think the average adventure gamer would want to experience for say 15 hours.
Well, that's the other thing, yeah.
Yeah, like
Do you want to
there's no
spend
way
15
to.
hours in the park?
Yeah, there's no way to like from a designer standpoint, there's no way to maintain such tension and such, let's say, cruelty, for lack of better word, and such like levels of that, like in an 8-hour game. Like, first off, I don't think anybody would reach the 8-hour length. They would probably be like, I can't play this anymore. Like, if it would ramp up, it would be like, very inhumane, and I don't think anybody would spend the time for it, and I don't think Mark would accept
Yeah.
to
Well,
release
I
such a
think
project.
I would have had a lot of my artwork continue to be censored even more because I was really ramping up the macabre levels and like using old 18th century medical illustrations and stuff and yeah, a couple of things got censored for the final cut, so I feel like that would have just gotten worse and worse to the point where it's like these guys are just like, Vic, we can't put that in the game. That's just way too revolting.
Yeah, it would be unbearable to the player, like, asking them to go through all that. I think it's in some levels quite unbearable, depending on somebody's psyche, to do that now.
Mm.
Um,
I'd tell you what I had planned asset wise for more parts of the game, but you'd have to bleep out most of what I say, basically.
Oh dear.
yeah, we had to cut a lot of parts, and there were a lot of parts that Vic drew, and then Mark was like, "So what is this?" And then Vic
Well,
would
yeah,
then explain.
I had to revise and flip some of my artwork and repaint it because it just came across as a bit too macabre, basically. But I
So,
Yeah,
definitely liked exploring that stuff. That was one of the more fun aspects of production, definitely.
all right. So we are starting to run low on time here, so I'll narrow down to my last couple of questions here. And the first of which is, so now that the game is out, how are you both feeling about the project?
Better than I'd expected, honestly. I kind of like that it's getting some I guess rubbing for lack of a better word, rubbing some people the wrong way, but it seems to be being received really well in others. Like people are digging my quote unquote surreal purple color scheme, which I love, and yeah, that's making me feel good.
Mm.
I think for me personally, like the biggest, and I think for Mark too, and Vic in some extent as well, like the biggest thing is that this is a game that really uh, defines, like, the ability to make you feel things, even if some of them are dark and like not optimal. Um, and I think the biggest issue we had during the production was how that all of this centers to Abe Goldfarb's performance.
Who I
And
thought was fantastic, actually. That's
yeah,
one thing I will say.
yeah, who I'll say went through a lot of ordeal for circumstances, but
I didn't even
eh,
like him at first, but yeah,
yeah, that was the thing that happened. Like, we didn't like
I don't like
Abe's
anything
initial.
that Dave does sometimes, though. So
We didn't like Abe's initial readings, and then he ended up, like, honestly being, I can't imagine Strangeland without anybody that is a part of it, especially Abe, especially Victor,
definitely not.
um,
Yeah.
especially Dave. Of course, he put like so much. He had to put up with a lot of things from us, like not too
Yeah,
much.
Dave has been fantastic for our production. All
Yeah,
props to that guy.
but I think
Well, it's a shame.
sorry, to answer your question, because I didn't. I am personally very proud of the end product, even when it's not received how we intended it and how we wished, rather. I'm really really proud of what has been achieved.
Well, that is good to hear. I mean, and yeah, reception is not one of those things that can be truly controlled. People will react how they react,
Oh,
but
And initial
definitely.
reception isn't always long-term reception either. Like, yeah.
mhm. Anyway, I suppose my final question at this point is: do you have any plans to bring Strangeland to other platforms, like specifically mobile devices?
I'm
James?
not. Yeah, I'm not sure about mobile devices, but there is, right now we're working on porting the game to more systems. Probably iOS is considered in terms of like the mobile part, at least. I'm not sure about Android. Um, but definitely like porting it and translating the game to more languages is a plan. As for other plans, we're gonna make a Strange Land 2, which is gonna be. No, I'm just kidding. It's not gonna be Blicker. But we're planning on. It's an idea. We haven't decided on it. It's still in the talks. But we want to go back to the sci-fi thing. Like Primordia. Like we have a project that's been like almost 10 years now in the making, probably more.
Very special project.
Yeah, very special project for Victor. Not bleak, not in that sense at least, like not brutal bleak, but it's like a sci-fi. So we'll see about that. I'm hopeful that it will, see the light of day, because it's been very unlucky to see that so far.
Indeed. Indeed. And maybe we'll have you back on our program here in however long that takes.
Hopefully not 5 years.
I'm like, hopefully not, but I also know how these things can go.
Yeah.
So,
hmm
anyway, I'll see if my colleagues here have any further questions for you.
I
No
think
worries.
I'm good.
Most of the questions I have been answered.
Yeah, most of mine have been answered too.
Okay, then.
Awesome.
All right. So the game is Strangeland. It's currently available on PC, Steam, and I think it's on GOG.
Yes, it is on GOG.
Okay. It's currently retailing for $13.49. That's 10% off. You can also get the soundtrack for $2.69. That is also 10% off. The offer there stands until June 1st, which is in a few days at time of recording. And yeah, I want to thank you both for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today.
Thank you so
having
much for
us.
having us. Yeah.
Yeah,
No
it's been
problem.
awesome.
And we are planning on reviewing the game on Sunday, and we'll send you over a link when that's done. So,
That would be nice.
okay.
Wicked.
Anyway, so Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. This week, at long last, we are talking about Epic versus Apple.
Oh boy.
Hold your applause.
Well, it's been the major story of the month, certainly.
Are you
Because,
sure I couldn't tell?
like, well, it's been so major that, mainstream news sites have been covering it. Not every day, but, like certainly when fucking Tim Cook showed up, I saw articles in NPR about it.
Tim Apple.
Yes. But yeah, so on Monday, the closing arguments in the 3-week trial were presented. And where things lie now is right now the judge is deliberating on how things are going to, lean. And, it's perhaps dangerous to speculate too hard based on what's going on, because keep in mind we've gone through the evidentiary portion of the trial, certainly, but there are a few things. First of all, in spite of the leaks, not everything got out to the public, so we don't know how much was kept from us, but I can definitely say that there's stuff that we don't know by design. Now, given what we do know, it's probably along the explosiveness of, it turns out Epic was paying Sony for crossplay. Here is how much Epic Games spent on free games for the year. here are Epic Games' plans to try and lure the three big console makers onto their storefront. You know, I could go on. There was a lot. There was a lot of information that got released, and one can imagine that certain parties are not happy about it. But that stuff is out there. But that's all a side show to what's been going on here. Keep that in mind. All that information is nice and juicy and gives us an inside look into what various video game companies have been doing or are planning. We got a lot of we learned a lot of what Fortnite's going to be doing over the course of the season, that kind of thing. But to frame it into the central narrative here, this is about the antitrust case or antitrust cases. Like there was a lot that we went through. Oh God. Just like and it's just not the mechanical details of the case either. It's not just is Apple a monopoly? It got philosophical. Like, we had questions. What is a game? And you might think that's an easy question to ask. If you've been paying attention to the show, I remind you that no, it isn't.
And also, philosophical questions in this context are kind of important because this could potentially set a legal precedent that establishes what pieces of software are covered by legislation that is about video games.
Right. And Apple has very different interpretations of what a video game is than perhaps some other companies. Like, according to them, Roblox isn't a game, it's an experience. And Roblox has decided to go ahead and run with that. But there was a lot that was covered here. Everything from Epic's dynamiting of the contract they had with Apple to what Apple promoted, to the 30% cut, to in-app purchase payments, to what they call anti-steering rules. Very briefly, anti-steering is the practice of mentioning or pointing to another place where you can get X thing for cheaper. In the case of Epic, specifically, they had a discount going on the Epic Game Store to circumvent Apple's rules when they did the whole what they call Project Liberty. This is what happens when you have fucking libertarians run your fucking company. You get projects like this, and that's another thing we learned over the course of the trial, just how premeditated this all was, and my point is, this all played out over the course of 3 weeks, over basically from 11 o'clock to 6 o'clock Eastern every day for 3 weeks straight. So 15 days of testimony. I won't lie, I didn't pay attention to all of it, especially when they started calling the expert witnesses. But they had a tendency to get into the weeds and talk past each other, which is a common thing that happens at the trial. And as far as who to root for, Um, you know, answer really because, you know,
There are no
both
winners here.
companies. It's not that there are no winners here because no, it's like you can't say that because once again the stakes of this outcome could be monumental, could be, but that's another thing that's in the calculations here. The scope, it could very well be that the judge rules very what they call narrowly. Whatever antitrust remedies that Apple might be guilty of, it might just be Apple that is guilty of them. That's kind of what Epic's been trying to do. Like Epic's been trying to protect their money base. As once again, another thing that we learned is that the bulk of income from Fortnite is coming from consoles, and like about half of it is from PlayStation and PlayStation alone. It's like iOS and Android was about 18%. Granted, Tim Sweeney wasn't exactly shy about their actual intentions here. It's like I believe he was asked point blank if Apple had offered them a special contract, would they have taken it? And they said yes. Which probably didn't help their case.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not to say that this whole thing has been frivolous. Far from it. The judge has been very pointed on Apple at points, especially the anti-steering rules. I'll be honest. If there's anything I think that's cooked, it's the anti-steering stuff. That really seemed to be where things were the strongest. Conversely, I don't think Epic's grand ambitions are going to be realized. Like the they basically want to bypass Apple entirely and set up their own stuff on Apple hardware. And the judge didn't really seem to be keen on that. And noted that Google has the same thing, and that's not an actual remedy to what they're talking about here. Plus, I don't see Epic Games being allowed back on the iOS, the Apple Store. But once again, it's hard to tell. As far as when we get a ruling, that's up in the air. Initially we heard before August 13th. As it turns out, that was an in-joke that nobody got. It was one of those in-jokes that was so in-jokey, only the in-jokist got it. I've made those. I think we all have. But, basically the in-joke was, oh, that is the anniversary of the date when, Project Liberty got started. That's when the hotfix got released and Bedlam was unleashed. So, as far as, she hopes to have sometime in the near future, but she mentioned there's thousands of documents to go through. But she wanted to get it while testimony is fresh and everything's fresh in the mind. So it does seem to be a sooner rather than later. And certainly when it comes up again, we will return to this topic. But until then, all we can do is the same thing that everyone else is doing: watching and waiting. There's one final note is this, not this lawsuit, but Tim Sweeney's rhetoric has inspired not copycats but related lawsuits. Valve is being sued by Wolfire Games. You may know them as the developers of the game Receiver. Though you probably know them for being the creators of the Humble Bundle. Keep in mind they were the initial creators. They sold that to IGN years ago, so they don't have any connection to the current day Humble Bundle, for better or worse. As but they're suing Valve because their recent game Overgrowth. Apparently Valve was going to kick them off. It's another anti-steering thing, basically. But their lawsuits probably got more of a hill to climb, because at the end of the day, the PC is an open platform. I'll keep in mind, Epic is suing Google for different reasons. Using its monopolist power to affect Epic business. But we'll get to Epic versus Google when we get to them. That actually has a motion to dismiss thing to face in a couple of months. So anyway, and there is a class action suit against PlayStation because digital only. I'm like, once again, we'll see how all that fares. In the meantime, yeah, it's been a fucking, I don't want to say roller coaster, because roller coasters are fast
and interesting.
Oh no, this was interesting.
Hmm.
This was very interesting. I can't say that wasn't interesting. Oh, ye gods, no. Like, it's just, this is more it's a small world ride or something like that. Something that's a lot slower. Something from Epcot, or it's like a lot of Disney rides would fall under this. Not a lot of thrills, but you certainly are learning a lot of stuff along the way. Like, anyway, so yeah, that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. As mentioned at the top of the show, no last news desk on left this week, as Mac is ride sharing right now. So the week ahead, on Friday, May 28th, we are planning on having Artur Gregozint of Forever Entertainment. I've probably butchered that name. But we are going to be talking about the House of the Dead remake. So I'm looking forward to that, because I rather enjoyed the House of the Dead games. Like specifically the first two games. Like, I remember one time in a Sega GameWorks playing through the entirety of House of the Dead 1 and getting to the end game of House of the Dead 2. So, yeah, they are among the best light gun games ever created. And that is something we will attempt, or at least I will attempt on asking, how they're going to translate that kind of gameplay to modern systems. I mean, I believe it's being aimed for the Nintendo Switch first, so I think the obvious is, it's going to be the Joy-Cons in light gun fashion. But interestingly enough, there really hasn't been a game that's done that on the Switch. So we had a bunch of this, but not so much the Switch. So more on that on Friday, if everything goes smoothly. Anyway, and on the Sunday reviews, we will have reviews of Strangeland, which we just did an interview about. Pink Man Plus for the PlayStation 4. Sumatra Fate of Yandi for the Nintendo Switch. And Ezron Defense Twilight will be on that one. So until Friday, I shall wish you good gaming.